Senator Kelly, good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
So good morning, Administrator Fox. Nice to see you here today, and thank you for the conversation we had yesterday. I want to start off by discussing the recently finalized rule by EPA and the Army Corps on the definition of waters of the United States. As you know, there's been a push by some in Congress to use the Congressional Review Act, a CRA, to repeal this rule. And now, you and I, we discussed some of my concerns here and those of Senator Sinema. The two of us, we sent a detailed letter to EPA and the Corps last week with some specific implementation questions. But I wanted to talk for a minute about what would happen if the CRA passed. So we're going to have a vote on it. So if it passed, I want to start with a few yes-no questions. So if the 2023 WOTUS rule were repealed, would the Trump-era navigable waters protection rule take effect?
No, it would not, because it was vacated in August 2021 by a federal court.
And would the 2015 Obama-era WOTUS rule take effect?
No, it would not.
So my understanding is the rule that would be in effect would be something similar to the pre-2015 WOTUS guidance. Is that correct?
That is correct, Senator.
And you know, that guidance, my understanding is that it relies on the same types of significant nexus test as the WOTUS rule that EPA and the Army Corps finalized this January. Is that right?
Yes, but there are key differences in how we approach it then in that 20.
Can you explain those differences?
Yes, sir. So the CRA, if it were to pass, it would, as you said, put us back to the pre-2015 definition of waters of the United States. That definition is broader than the 2020, our 2023. Our 2023 rule is more narrow in the definition of waters of the United States. It is more uncertain, and so there would be key challenges. You know, with a CRA, we would, you know, you can't sort of take parts of the rule that work and parts that don't, that, you know, people might have concern. It wipes out the entire rule and puts back in place the 2015. So we would, for example, on the question of the two tests, significant nexus and relatively permanent, in our 2023 rule, significant nexus is much more narrowly defined than in 2015, and it would be utilized only in a very small number of waters, whereas it would be much more broad in, you know, in 2015 versus 2023. Another challenge of if the CRA would pass is that many of the exemptions and exclusions that I was talking to Senator Kramer about just a moment ago, those would all be voided out. And because the CRA says that agencies cannot ever adopt a rule that's similar in the future, we may never be able to ever bring back things like prior converted crop or exemptions for artificial ponds, things like that. So it really would create confusion, uncertainty, and void the very common sense aspects of the rule that we work so hard to put in place.
So the things we did in the 2023 rule that actually made it narrower,
yes,
if we go back to the 2015 and we do it through the CRA process, in the future we couldn't use those same items as you just addressed to get a more narrower definition of waters of the United States.
That is correct. The agencies are prevented from issuing anything that's similar.
So yeah, this took us a while to, you know, sort through. It's not an obvious, you know, thing how sometimes you can be through a CRA process, you're trying to get an outcome that might be narrower, and in fact, you have some unintended consequences. And I think that is the case here. Is that your sense?
That is absolutely the case. We would be throwing out a narrower definition of waters of the United States. We'd be throwing out all of the implementation direction that we provided. We'd be throwing out the collaboration memos between USDA and EPA and Army Corps that will help with good implementation. We'd be going back to a broader definition of significant nexus. It would create a great deal of uncertainty in communities across the country. We believe it would lead to delays in permitting important projects, permitting infrastructure projects, development happening on land. And so it's not the right tool. We can always improve on waters of the United States. We welcome that conversation with this committee. We are also laser sharp focused on doing implementation work in a way that addresses the regional differences across the country. We lose all of that if this rule gets CRA'd.
Thank you, Administrator Fox. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kelly.